Alright, guys. Excuse me. I had a guy make a request a while back that followed my readings of stuff out of this here book, and it's a little bit overdue. I think it's been a couple weeks, damn near a month, and right when I post this video, I'll give him a comment message, another response comment, telling him that, yeah, I have indeed posted another video after I posted this video. So I'm going to read the introduction to Jubilees, and hopefully maybe read the entire Jubilees. And this can be good for a lot of you guys that already have knowledge of Genesis and Exodus in that their King James Bible. And if you're a little like me, thinking that from that King James Bible, it's not popular to say that it's incomplete. There's stuff that you really like to know. There's a lot of stuff in here that satisfies that. But also, I had finally got around to buying a crisp new copy from an Amazon.com seller, and they were gracious enough to take lamination here and put over top of this, the main cover here, so I like that a lot. I've gave them a good rating on Amazon.com at the time too. And I actually bought this, right before the holidays. Me and the girlfriend are doing Salvation Army kettle drive. I usually get laid off from my job that I was working outside in the wintertime, so I got to do that. So I ordered this along around that time. So anyway, all right, 2 minutes into this video. Yeah, in a nutshell. Anyway, if you like to know where to buy one of these, I'll tell you how. Go to Amazon.com and run a check on this. But anyway, I'm gonna get on with it and just go ahead and read this introduction. And hopefully, if I have the time, along with everything else I'm doing in my life, that I can maybe gradually do videos on doing the entire book of Jubilees little by little. But alright then, let's just get started. Yeah, this is just the introduction. Right here, the introduction. So we're going to get started. It'll be about maybe 7 pages long or so, or something like that. Alright, here we go then. Okay. Jubilees describes itself in the prologue as the account of the division of the days of the law and the testimony of the events, the years according to their year weeks and their jubilees. They're all the years of the world, through all the years of the world as the Lord gave it to Moses on Mount Sinai, when he went up to receive the stone tablets of the law and the commandment in accordance with God's command, as he said to him, go up to the top of the mount. And the scene is accordingly set in biblical context of Exodus, Roman numeral XXIV 12:18. During the 40 days and 40 nights that Moses on the mount, the angel of the presence recounts to him all the significant events of the creation, from the creation to the Exodus. And let's read that part again. During the 40 days and 40 nights that Moses is on the mount, the angel of the presence recounts to him all the significant events from the creation to the Exodus, including the circumstances of his own birth and early history, the passage of the Red Sea, and the celebration of the first Passover, and also initiates him into the mysteries of the secret traditions which have already been communicated to certain of the patriarchs. These traditions have been handed down from father to son in some instances, in writing, and Moses is now instructed to write what is revealed to him in a book, an introduction obviously inspired by the statement at Exodus, Roman numeral XXIV.4. Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. The definite instruction at Exodus XXXIV.27. Write these words down, but the book referred to in Jubilees is not the book of the covenant, from which Moses reads at Exodus XXIV.7. Nor is it one of the books of the Pentateuch traditionally ascribed to Moses in the book of Jubilees itself, whereas in the Pentateuch the first law had been published by Moses openly. I have to read that again. It is the book of whereas the Pentateuch, the first law, had been published by Moses openly. Interesting. So, other words, there was a part of it that was published by Moses openly, and a part that was not. Jubilees is represented as a kind of a second law, although the actual phrase does not occur, which Moses is commissioned to write to preserve for all generations in all the last times, till I descend and dwell with them through all eternity. Jubilees is thus in context. Jubilees is thus in content, for the most part, a parallel version of Genesis. A parallel version of Genesis 1 and Exodus, Roman numeral XV.22. And it stands in much the same sort of relationship to the primary biblical sources as the books of Chronicles to the books of Samuel and Kings. Just as the chronicler had rewritten Samuel and Kings, concentrating on the religious aspects of Israel's history, especially on the temple and its worship, and on the part that David played in the preparations for its building. So the author of Jubilees has rewritten the material in Genesis, Roman numeral 1, Exodus, Roman numeral XV.22, partly in order to bring it up to date from the point of view of the beliefs and practices of its own day, but more particularly in order to bring it into line with its own special theological outlook and interests. Many of its additions to the Genesis-Exodus narrative would seem to have been derived from traditional Jewish folklore, since parallels are found elsewhere. This account of how Abraham protested to his father Terah about the worship of idols, how one night Abraham set fire to the idol's house, and how his brother Nahor perished in trying to save the idols, has parallels not only in the apocalypse of Abraham, but also in rabbinic sources, and similarly Thermuth, the name given to Pharaoh's daughter who rescued Moses from the bulrushes, is paralleled by the Thermuthis of Josephus. No doubt too many of the names of the patriarchal wives were also derived from tradition, but in any case, whether such details were traditional in origin, or whether the author himself invented them, there is abundant evidence of his concern throughout to trace all the social and religious institutions of which he most approved back to the earliest times, to uphold and assert the eternal validity of the law, and to present the patriarchs the as the exemplary saints of Israel's past, who had in fact observed the law and all its particulars before it was formally promulgated, or whatever the word is. Okay. The wearing of clothes, for example, is said to have originated in a specific obligation laid by God on Adam when he left the Garden of Eden, in accordance with the prescription on the heavenly tablets that all those familiar with provisions of the law should cover their shame and not uncover themselves, as the Gentiles uncover themselves. Again, the annual celebration of the Feast of Weeks was ordained and written on the heavenly tablets. Weeks had been celebrated in heaven from the creation. Noah had observed it, so had Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Jacob's children, and it was the feast celebrated by Moses and the elders on Mount Sinai at the time of the giving of the law. And so that one might think that anything any of the patriarchs did was discreditable. The deceptions practiced by Abraham and Isaac on Pharaoh and Abimelech, described at length in Genesis, are in Jubilees passed over in silence, and the motivation of Abraham's attempted sacrifice of Isaac as ascribed neither to God nor to Abraham himself, but to the evil prince Mastema, who prompts God to test Abraham, much as in the Bible Satan prompts God to test Job, and in the event to put shame by Abraham's faithfulness obeying the divine command. But the far most notable feature about the book, however, is the calendar of some kind was, of course, let me read that part again. By far the most notable feature about the book, however, is the author's very evident interest in chronology and calendars. Now skip the sentence there. A calendar of some kind was, of course, an essential requisite for the correct regulation of the various feasts, and the calendar followed in Jubilees seemed to presuppose a year divided in 12 months of 30 days each, which an extra day added at the end of every third month, or more accurately at the beginning of every fourth or first. Such an arrangement resulted in a year of 4 quarters, each of 91 days or exactly 13 weeks, making 52 weeks and 364 days in all. This calendar was not the only calendar in use in the author's day, as he himself clearly recognized, but it had been the advantage of simplicity in that the days of the week and the month were the same in each successive year, and that the feasts always fell regularly on the first day of the week in which they have occurred. Fundamental to any calendar must be the week of 7 days ordained by God at the creation. In Leviticus Roman numeral XXV, the idea of the 7-day week had already been extended to cover not only an additional time period of 7 years, week of years, but also a further one of 7 times 7, 49 years, with a 50th year of Jubilee at the end. It was this extension that caught our author's fancy, or perhaps the fancy of some other member of the religious community to which he belonged, and prompted him to extend it further and adapt it to provide the basis for a complete chronological scheme. In the process, the word Jubilee changed its meaning. No longer was it just a descriptive of nth that applied to every 50th year, as it was in Leviticus. Now it was used as a standard technical term to mean the whole of a 49-year period, and so it became the most significant of all the units for the measurement of time, presumably because it was the longest. Consequently, the entire course of history could be divided into jubilees and events dated by the reference to a particular jubilee and its appropriate subdivisions: weeks, years, months, weeks, and days. Thus, every week of the first jubilee of all was occupied with creation and given the great sign, the Sabbath. The first 5 days of the second week were taken up with Abraham's review of the animals and his naming of them. And Eve was created during the night between the 5th day and the 6th. The temptation by the serpent is assigned to the 17th year of the second month after the conclusion of the first 7-year period. In modern terms, 7, they have these numbers, 1, 7, 2, or 17, 2, and 8. I got a little key down here to see what the hell that means over here too. See what the heck does that mean. These little numbers here. But anyway, the death of Isaac in the 6th year, and okay, hold on, I missed some a sentence here. Okay, in modern terms, an expulsion from Eden to the 4th month of the same year. Cain was born in the third 7-year period. Cain was born in the third 7-year period. Yeah, I'll repeat that. Or week according to the author's terminology of the second Jubilee, i.e. between 64 and 70. Abel in the 4th between 71 and 77. And Cain murdered Abel in the first week of the third Jubilee between 99 and 105. The birth of Abraham is dated in the 7th year of the second week of the 39th Jubilee, i.e. 1976. i.e. 1876. The death of Isaac in the 6th year of the first week of the 45th Jubilee, i.e. 2162. And the descent of Jacob and his sons into Egypt 10 years later on the new moon of the 4th month in the 2nd year of the 3rd week of the 49th Jubilee, i.e. 1.4.2172. Yeah, these crazy numbers again. Like there's a little key down here that sort of trying to explain them too. Yeah, the first time I read that, it almost messed me up and caused me to lose my place while I was reading. Finally, the Exodus, the passage of the Red Sea, and the revelation on Sinai are dated the year 2410, and the completion of the 49th Jubilee 9 years previously is remarked on the passage, and there are yet 40 years to run before Israel enters Canaan on the completion of the 50th Jubilee, i.e. in 2450, after which the Jubilees shall pass till Israel is cleansed from all guilt, and the land shall be cleaned from that day forward forevermore. There can be no doubt that the light of all this, that the author, let me start over. There can be no doubt in the light of all this that the author was a Jew who lived in one of the later centuries BC, and scholarly opinion was varied between the 5th century and the 1st. most preferring a date about 100 BC. The earliest evidence for the existence of Jubilees is to be found in the so-called Zadokite fragments, or Damascus document, associated with the sect at Qumran. There are several apparent allusions to Jubilees in the course of this work, and in one passage it is referred to explicitly. The exact statement of the epochs of Israel's blindness to all these, i.e. the ordinances of the law. Behold, it can be learned in the book of the divisions of the times into their Jubilees and their weeks. Some would argue that both Jubilees and the Damascus document were productions of the Qumran sect. But whether this be so or not, we are no better informed about the date of the Damascus document than we are about the date of Jubilees, and so to reference to Jubilees in the document does no more than establish the priority of Jubilees. In the rabbinic literature, there is no certain reference to it anywhere. Among Christians, the book seems to have been known comparatively early. So far as our evidence goes, the first Christian to refer to it by name was the blind Alexandrian scholar Didymus, in the 4th century, and he calls it the Little Genesis. Yep, that's what they call it. This was the most popular name for it in the church, being used, for example, by Jerome. The name Jubilees is the first found in Epiphanius, who gives Jubilees and the Little Genesis as alternatives. Another alternative, according to the Galatian decree, was the book about the daughters of Adam. Yet another appears to have been the Apocalypse of Moses, and another perhaps the life of Adam. Though this last work may have Though this last work may have been no more than an abstract, consisting only of the parts of the opening chapters, since the book first became known in modern times, it has been argued on purely internal and circumstantial grounds that it was originally written in Hebrew, through some notably C.C. Torrey have suggested Aramaic. The arguments in favor of Hebrew have recently been considered strengthened, not merely by the evidence of the Damascus document, but also by the fact that the number of fragments of Jubilees from 10 different manuscripts have been found in 4 of the Qumran caves, and all of them are in Hebrew. A further fragment also in Hebrew have been found in Masada. At a date unknown, a Greek version was made, of which only extracts now survive, mainly in Epiphanes and Byzantine chroniclers, Syncellus and Cedrenus. Later on, Greek version was translated into both Latin and Ethiopic. Of the Latin, there are substantial surviving fragments preserved in the same 6th century MS that contains also the Assumption of Moses. The fragments were edited by Suriani in 1861 and cover more than a quarter of the complete text, and according to, I pronounce his name, Ronash, their later editor, the date of the Latin version itself was about 100 years earlier than the MS, i.e. mid-5th century. It is probable that there is also a Syriac version, and if the results of Tisserand's study of what are apparently extensive extracts preserved in an anonymous late 12th century chronicle are accepted, preserved in an anonymous late 12th century chronicle are accepted. Then the Syriac version was made direct from the Hebrew without reference to the Greek, and about the same time as the Peshitta. The Ethiopic version alone, start this again. The Ethiopic version alone was preserved, the complete text of the book. Dillman, the first editor of it, worked from 2 MS only, one in Tübingen, 19th century, and one in Paris, 17th century. Charles, for his edition of 1895, added 2 more of the 16th and 15th centuries in London and Paris. Since Charles's day, at least half a dozen other MSS have come to light, in which there are probably of the 14th century, the oldest yet discovered. The translation which follows is a thoroughgoing revision of Charles's translation of his own Ethiopic text. Any conflict of any importance between this text and the text in the Latin fragments where they are extant, this has attention drawn to it in the notes, and it will be found that overall, in these instances, we have preferred the Latin rather more frequently than in Charles. Okay, we admit that we have preferred the Latin rather more frequently than Charles did. Unfortunately, none of the Hebrew fragments so far available is sufficiently substantial to enable us to establish anything like a continuous text in any part of the book. What does emerge, however, from a detailed study of these fragments is the impression that the Ethiopic version, despite the fact that it is a secondary version, is nevertheless to be accepted as a generally trustworthy and reliable guide to the Hebrew original. And it ends with a little bibliography here, and I think that's about it. And next up is the actual reading of this, which I'll try to get to another video, which starts out with Moses, of course, which this will be in a later video because this video is already half-hour long. So okay, until next time, I'll get on that when I have the time to read that. But if you're interested in this, all you do is go on Amazon.com and look up this version of the book. The books of Enoch are also in here. The Odes of Solomon, the Testament of Solomon, the Apocalypse of Abraham is in here. The life of Adam and Eve, and all that stuff. So, all right. So that's the end of the video, and I will see you next time. Hopefully with the reading of the actual Jubilees itself. And yeah, it has lots of interesting stuff in it, you know. If you ever followed the King James Bible and wondered, you know, had a lot of questions, you know, this will answer some. So until next time, that's it.